Jay, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me, brother.
100%, dude. So, for people that don't know you and your story, give us a spark notes. Who you are, where you coming from, what are you doing now?
As a kid, I was, super skinny, socially awkward, shy, insecure. Well, first I was fat, then I was skinny fat, not athletic. And I grew up, I'm 48, so I grew up watching pro wrestling every Saturday morning. And I was like, man, I want to be like one of those guys, which was so far removed from who I was at the time.
Yeah.
So I got into training for that to kind of boost my confidence and become someone totally different. It didn't work. I didn't know what I was doing. So I graduated high school. I've been training since seventh grade, same height I am now, 6 feet, 147 pounds. So I had to really, like, if it came naturally to me, if I had good genetics, I probably wouldn't have ended up taking the career path that I did. But I was getting nowhere, and I was like, man, I got to figure this out. Like it just became an obsession. So I went into college with a communications major, but then I switched over to exercise science because I was just like immersed in this. And then I figured it out, and I ended up getting up to like 230. But anyway, so it became my career. So I started interning in the weight room. When I was 19, I got tuberculosis, which, I didn't think anyone got that since Doc Holliday. So I had to go home, take a semester off. I had to be on like 30 pills a day for a year. Made my pee turn the fire engine red like the color of my shirt. And that summer I started, well, actually that winter while I was home and I was sick, there's no internet back then. So I'm getting like every book I could possibly order, course from the back of Iron Man magazine, get certified, start training people that summer at 19. Somehow by the end of that summer, knowing very little about training, very little about business, I'm on pace to make six figures that year. So I'm like, this is crazy. I'm going to transfer back home, go to school here. And then, so that was it. So for like 2 years, I went to school, trained people. It was just all day. It was like from 5 a.m. to like 9. Saved every dime I could to invest in my first space. Like, I don't even know how I had the balls to be like, let me just open my own private training space,
Yeah.
at 2021. And it was literally underground. Like, people say, oh, it was my underground. Like, it was literally underground. It was in a basement. And it was one of those kind of original, like, underground warehouse, hardcore box style gym, 20 years before CrossFit came around. And we
Yeah.
had sleds and sledgehammers and sandbags and all the things. And it became kind of like legendary locally. Like, anyone within a 20-minute driving distance, every high school athlete, like, I can still name some of the rushing records, the scoring records. Like, we were just crushing with high school athletes and stuff like that. Then they went on to play college. Those guys went on to become pros. They would bring their teammates back in the off season. So it was crazy. Like, some, just epic memories. I mean, to this day, some of those guys are still close friends of mine. They're like in their 40s now, but they started training with me. They were 13 or whatever, and training with me until they were 30. And what we did that was so different was back then, the only thing that existed was you go to a public gym. This is 1994. Or you take like aerobics classes. Like, group training as we know it didn't exist. So I always say, half jokingly, but not really, that I invented group training as it's known today because no one was doing it. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like a stroke of genius. It was just, I got my first athlete training regular people. Then I got my first athlete. His name is Mike Schwab. To this day, 30 years later, he's a good friend of mine, like a little brother to me. He's got to be 40 now. I started training Mike. He refers in his friend Chris, who went on to become the captain of the Columbia football team after training through high school. And then they referred in Joey, and they were like, can we just train together instead of training one-on-one like I was doing with the adults? I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, why don't I just cut their rate in like half or whatever? And that's the athlete group rate. And that just took off. So then it started as like 4-on-1, then became 6-on-1. And so a lot of really well-known fitness professionals, Mark Bell, Zach Evanes, Joe DeFranco, Alan Cosgrove, like, I kind of taught them that model. And I
Yeah.
helped a lot of those guys actually get started. And I've known a lot of those guys since, 94, 95, 96. But yeah, so that was it. So like, we were blowing up, and we were getting such sick results that magazines started reaching out. So I started writing for different magazines, different websites. Dave Tate put me on which back then was just huge, to be on the Q&A section of Elite FTS. Got my own column in Men's Fitness. I wrote the hard gainer column for probably 10 years. Cause like I said, I was like the ultimate hard gainer,
Yeah.
And then I became the chief training advisor for the whole magazine, did my first book with Penguin in 2007. And then, like, fast forward to today, we're almost 500 episodes in the podcast. I'm 9 years into it. So I do that. I do my own live events. I still do coaching, consulting, speak probably 12, 15 times a year. Now it's more all encompassing, but in the early days, it was just 15 hours a day in that little underground dungeon, which was amazing.
Dude, I'm like picturing the energy in a place like that. Like, and this was still in the Northeast, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It was 1,000 square feet, and we would have Public Enemy and NWA playing, like signs on the wall, like offensive shit, like. And it
Yeah.
wasn't like I wasn't selling people. Like people came in, and I was like, "Yo, what's up?" And they're like, "What do you mean, what's up?" I was like, "What the fuck do you want?" They're like, "Oh, I was when I could train my buddy's trainer." I was like, "Well, let's go. Sign this fucking thing. This is your first workout. This is your tryout. If you're a bitch, you're a pussy. You ain't training here." Like, like we used to kick people out. I remember when cell phones first came out. Like if someone had their phone, I would throw it out the door. Like it
Yeah.
was like I don't even know if you could get away with that shit these days, but it made for kind of
Yeah.
legendary times and epic stories.
Yeah. It's dude, when I first moved to Jersey, so right after college, I went to college based on where I could play soccer. I played collegiate athletics for 4 years. Then I moved to New York City. Then eventually I moved to Jersey City when I wanted to save more money and pump it all into my business. And that was coincidentally right when I started like training for my first powerlifting meet. And I remember jumping on Google and I'm like, powerlifting gym in New York, in Jersey City, right? Because I didn't know the neighborhood and I did not like, I wanted to avoid at all costs training for powerlifting at like a fucking Crunch Fitness or something, you know?
Right,
No
right.
disrespect to Crunch, but like I want the vibe that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I dumb lucked my way into a phenomenal gym that was run by my now friend Jason Mannenkoff called Iron Arena in North Bergen. And it
Mm,
was like that vibe, right? It was like
right,
24-hour door code access. Like you plug your phone in, it's literally above a warehouse and above like a brewery. So you
nice.
would just like plug your phone in, blast whatever the hell you want to get into state to try and squat the world,
Yeah,
and like dude, I love that like hardcore
yeah. It's
kind
fun.
of environment. It's crucial if you want to lift heavy shit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
How long did you run that gym?
The first we had to move eventually. But we were the first location for 11 years, the second one for 4. Yeah, I think that was what it was. And then
Got
then,
it.
then I moved to LA. But yeah, it's 15
What
years.
prompted the LA move?
It's just a lot of personal growth, right? It was like, and people always ask me what was the impetus for that? Like, was it a book? I guess it was just a combination of maybe I started reading different books and meeting different people and just thinking different way. And like, I do remember hearing the Henry Rollins quote about, moving somewhere else. It's hard to reinvent yourself in the same place. Like I was like, things are good, but am I really growing? And I realized there was a lot of
Hmm.
self-limiting beliefs and false narratives I was telling myself. And I would try, but then it was always just like a case of like, oh, who's this guy think he is? Like, that they knew me one way for 34, 5 years. And then I just found it to be difficult. Other people maybe stronger could do it, but I was like, I got to move as far away as possible, other side of the country, and give myself a chance to reinvent myself. And,
Yeah.
so that was really the impetus for the move there.
And what year was this?
2011.
2011.
Yeah.
Got it. So that like how big was the fitness scene in that LA area at that point? Like
Well,
obviously the
at that
ultimate
point,
like
it was just me. I was all online, so it didn't matter. I
yeah.
was leaving the gym and the brick and mortar, so it didn't really matter that much. I mean, I was in Santa Monica, walking distance from the original Muscle Beach, the birthplace
Yeah,
of
well
culture. So all
that's
that
really
was
what I'm
cool.
asking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that
like
was great. I
environment
love
wise.
that. Yeah, oh, amazing. I loved it. Yeah, because we
Yeah.
lived right on the beach, so every day you'd wake up, you see people surfing, swinging kettlebells outside, playing tennis, playing hoops, running, whatever, and it's like, oh, let's go. Like, it's a
Yeah.
very motivating atmosphere.
Yeah, dude. The first mastermind that I ever went to out in California was in Santa Monica. It was the last one that was ever in Santa Monica, but it was really cool because I had never really been to California much before. So that's like a really cool spot to kind of have your introduction to.
Yeah. Oh
Like
my God. Yeah.
being right on the beach, we have a lot of clients out there. So like, and they knock doors for a living. So it very much is that culture, like go out, surf in the morning.
Yeah.
Then later in the day, you get to your correlation meeting and then you hit the doors in the afternoon for prime time, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's such an interesting vibe. It's so different than the East Coast. How did you transition? Like, how did that transition go for you?
Instantly. I fucking loved it.
Yeah.
I was over a lot of the like, I mean, there's always part of that in your DNA, right? Like the Northeast hustle and grind and all that, and
Yeah.
having little patience, like a low bullshit tolerance. You know what I mean? But I was kind of like, again, it was just refreshing. Like I wanted to get away from all that And so it was great. Like, there's more health, there's more good, healthy food to eat than anywhere else. There's just a great vibe. And also, my experience there kind of paints a different picture where it's just like I changed everything about who I am, how much money I made, how much confidence I had, my inner circle. And it was basically like 10 years of fantasy camp. Like everything that was happening out there was amazing.
Yeah.
And obviously I worked to bring that to fruition. I didn't just stumble into the streets and it was like this amazing. Like I went there with with an intent to make all that happen.
And all of your clients were virtual at this point, you said?
Yeah, I mean, by that point we had 3,000 people in a $20 a month kind of workout monthly membership type deal. Then I had uh whatever else, we had other sources of income and whatnot. But yeah, so I wasn't really working with anyone. And then what I did was a few years into it, and Bedros was the impetus for this. Do you know Bedros Koulianos?
Yeah, I had him on the show like episode 20 or something like that. He's a
Awesome.
good guy.
So yeah, so B's one of my closest friends in the world, and so we would hang out. That's one of the things I miss the most is just hanging out with him all the time.
Yeah.
Um, but he kind of like you know, not forced me, but was like super hard. He was pushing me to start like a higher ticket coaching group, And I was like,
Yeah.
well, I don't even know. I'm not ready. I don't have anything planned. It's just going to be pure fitness. What's it going to be? He's like, who fucking cares? Like, let's just sit down and we'll make it happen. So I started doing that probably around the time I did the podcast, like 9 years ago too. So we've done that, where it's kind of like, just like men's stuff. Like it's like mindset, fitness, a little bit of business, relationships, stuff like that.
Sweet. Yeah, it's I mean, I live in the high ticket world as well, so
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it. I think that intro part is always interesting, right? Like figuring out what is it that we're going to sell.
Yeah.
And we need people like Bedros in our corner to just be like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like,
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
start selling it. You'll figure it out. Right.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, because on paper, a lot of those things are like, it's the exact opposite of like what Hormozy would say is a $1 million offer. It's like, there's not a lot of like, you know what I mean? Like one of those
Yeah.
kitchen sink offers, but it's just then you got to just be personal branding, right? Like, I don't know. We get
Yeah.
it all complicated.
No, yeah. If you, well, it sounds like at that point you had the personal brand. So like you could start with that offer and figure out how to chisel it down as you go.
Yeah, it was basically like I remember it was a day after my birthday. Bedros came over. We're hanging out on my couch, and he's like, "Yo, here's the transition you made. You fucking speak on stages now. You make 10 times the amount of money. You're known as the mayor of Santa Monica. You know everybody. Like you're the super connector and shit like that. Like people just want to make that same transition you did. You're in the best shape of your life at 40. So let's just do that. Like
Mhm.
And I was like, whatever. And it fucking worked. Like we had the second we launched it. It was that back then it was $1,000 a month or 10 grand for the year. We got 30 guys in it within like no time. I was like, it's amazing. And the events, doing events like that's so much fun, just getting to see like the connection and seeing the guys from one event to the next kind of transform their
Yeah.
mindset. Like I remember this one time, a dude named Kenny, who's still, kind of part of our crew and everything. Kenny was super shy, socially awkward, like his posture reflect everything about him. Like, dude, like third event that year, like 9 months later, somebody sees Kenny coming from like 4 blocks away, and we're like, oh, there's no way that's Kenny. You didn't think it was Kenny because he's walking like the Rock, like he's so confident, he's got this swagger. It was Kenny, and I had to tell him when he came up to us. I was like, bro, here's what we were all just saying. It's fucking amazing, like to see guys go like from one way to a complete opposite where they're like the inspiration. Like this guy Steve who moved here now. He joined my group in 2018. Couldn't speak in front of a group. Steve just turned 35. He actually started like his voice would crack, he would shake, he was almost tearing up, like it was just so challenging for him. And now when I run events here, Steve comes and helps me out and talks, and like I almost tear up because I'm so proud watching him.
Yeah. Dude, that's the best. And like, I don't know. I feel like it's so easy for people that don't understand this work in this industry to look in and be like, well, yeah, of course you're saying it's the best because you don't want to look like a money hungry idiot, But like you could tell who's in this industry and like is in it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And those people, like I know exactly what you're talking about. That
Yeah.
feeling when you see someone that is so radically different from when they started in whatever realm it is,
Yeah.
whether it's their relationship, their money, like their fitness, mindset, whatever it is, like, dude, there's no better feeling.
Yeah, totally. And we've had guys, at least three guys that got divorced. You know, you brought up relationships there, and we all told them they had to get divorced. Like once we got to know them,
Yeah.
I was like, bro, there's no healing that relationship. Get divorced. And all three, like their life did a 180. They're so happy. They're so much better. And then we had a couple guys, maybe five guys, who were like, I'm within a week of getting divorced, and now their relationship's epic. So it's so cool to see those kind of things, you know?
100%. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think people realize that that's really like the ROI. Like in my world, so I mean, we work with sales guys and we help them make more money, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not a sales coach. I'm a high performance coach. So that's like all encompassing. And people don't realize that like the work we do to scale their business, frankly, has nothing to do with business. And it gets directly applied to every other area of their life as well.
Mm.
I'm like literally taking their credit card on a phone call. And I'm like, dude, just a heads up, like an extra zero on the bank account is not going to shift your world. Like we'll get you there and that's going to feel amazing. But I guarantee you the true breakthrough is going to be in your relationships and your health and your mindfulness, like whatever it is out, like the life stuff,
Mm.
right? Making those things non-negotiable. I don't think people understand how valuable that is. And I get it. Like when you're in that state, it's kind of like someone telling you it's not all about money, but when you don't have money, it's pretty fucking about money, you know?
It is.
Um,
Exactly.
but those other pieces, like that's the ROI.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So these events that you were running, were they all local? And like how big were these, like were they micro events? Like what were you doing?
Yeah, first we started with 12 people, and we I just made it up as I went along. Like
Yeah.
Bezos was like, "Yo, let's do this." I was like, "All right, let's get one on the calendar for 8 weeks out." And so we would start, like I said, we lived right on the beach in Santa Monica, so I made it convenient for me. We started right out on the beach, 2 minute walking distance, at 6 in the morning. And what I would do is, first we had 12 guys, and eventually we moved it up to like 16 guys, and that seemed to be like sweet spot for what we did because it was real high touch. We'd start on the beach with like a brutal workout and stuff like that. Then we would kind of just go into sharing, like why you're here, what are your struggles with, you know, challenges, things like that. Then throughout the weekend, like I would give a talk, and then I would bring different people in. Like fortunate enough to be really well connected and know a lot of people. So Bedros might come, Tony Blauer might come. My friend Dr. Mark Chang would do a like 2 hour kind of workshop. Do you know what Mark is?
I don't think so.
Mark is great cook, is like one of the best rehab guys. He's got what's called the functional movement screen. He's like Mark's like the number one guy in that, and then Pavel in Strong First, who kind of popularized kettlebells in the U.S. He was like
Mhm.
Pavel's number one guy. He's just a brilliant dude. Like, and he's like a
Yeah.
ninja. He's trained in any fight sport. He's got a black belt in every martial art. So he would come in
Sick.
and just do like 2 hours of really cool stuff. Do you know Tony Jeffries? He's got a big following now. He's an Olympic medal winning boxer. So I used to
No, I
box
don't
with
think
Tony,
so.
really good friend of mine, great dude. They would go box with Tony. Obviously, I would put everyone through workouts. I would have Dr. Belisa Branich is a good friend of mine. She would come in and do breath work. What else would we do? We would hike. You know, and then just a lot of sharing and talks and kind of like, you know, stuff pushing you out of your comfort zone, challenging stuff.
Yeah.
And then we're together like 12 hours a day. I'm taking the guys out to dinner. We're what else? So I did improv. One of the things I did when I got to LA in my kind of journey of, you know, personal growth and whatnot was, all right, I've always been super shy and quiet and socially awkward. Like I want to do a 180. So my friend John Hennigan, I don't know if you know anything about pro wrestling.
Not too. I watched a little bit growing up. I was born in 1990. So like it was towards the end of it being like really big, like before it was WWE to WW or WWF to W. No,
WWE,
which
yeah, yeah,
one?
yeah. Yep. It was
Yeah.
WWF, then it became WWE.
Yeah. So like my dad really liked it. So I watched it a little bit up until that transition point. That's the milestone I remember.
Okay. Yeah. So I work with some of those guys. A lot like half the roster is good friends of mine and whatnot. So Morris, his name was John Morrison. So Morrison hit me up and he's like, "Yo, I'm doing a show at Second City tonight. Come by." I go, I watch it, and I was like, "Do you remember DX?
No, I
Degeneration?"
remember
Okay.
like Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is the second time I've talked about him today, and I don't think I've talked about him in like a decade. So
Oh wow.
I don't know what's going on today, but I remember him, obviously The Rock. Like I didn't know
Yeah.
too much about it.
Okay. So in those days, in the heydays of the Rock and Stone Cold, was DX, Degeneration X, with Shawn Michaels in it and Triple H. Uh,
Yep.
X Pac was in it. I don't know if you remember X Pac. So he was in the show that night. So all of us go out. afterwards to the bar, and the dude Sam something from Veep with Julia Louis-Dreyfus was in there too.
Okay.
So we all go out, we're hanging out, and I was like, bro, you're telling me you didn't like rehearse or plan any of that? And he's like, are you a fucking numbnuts? It's improv, you understand? I was like, yeah, no, but it was so good, like it was so funny. Like, how'd you? And the guy who taught at Second City was there with us, and he's like, bro, there's a new semester starting tomorrow. Here, go on your phone, sign up. You should do it. It's going to be life changing for you. And it honestly was. It was like
Improv
one
class?
of, oh my God, bro, one of the best things I've ever done. Absolutely life changing. I think it should be required in high school and college. It totally changed everything about my life. Like it's skyrocketed my ability to speak in front of groups, to be in front of an audience, to do whatever. So I ended up going 2 years consistently, and then on and off for the next 2 years. And now, so like whenever a lot of times if I'm doing an event, I'll always incorporate it in my events. If I work with teams, like I had 160 something members of the Dodgers all doing improv, like all up their coaching staff. I've done that with the Twins. So it's awesome. And then I got to perform in a lot of shows. I got to perform at the theater on Hollywood Boulevard. Bedros came to see me. Craig Ballantyne came to see me one time. Super fun. So I did that. Then I took stand-up comedy classes, which the stand-up wasn't as good. It wasn't as helpful. I felt like the improv was much more helpful. And then I also did who Roger Love is? He's like the world's greatest vocal coach.
No, but that sounds interesting.
Bro, epic. That's something else. So he runs an event called the Voice of Success, and it was at the Grammy Museum in LA. So we went to it, and halfway through, I was like, yo, this is one of the great, and I go to a lot of events like that. I was like, this is one of the greatest fucking events I've ever been to. This is epic. And halfway through the second day, he makes the pitch, and it's 27 grand to join the thing. So I start filling it out. The fuck, I got to do it. And my wife is crying, and she starts filling it out. I'm like, wait, what? I was like, I'm going in for 54 now? Like, but she was
I hope
so
they cut you a
into it.
deal.
No. But she was so into it, and it just moved her. Like, it's worth going to one of his events. The way he does it is absolutely epic. And like, he'll bring people up on stage who are not really good at all, and he'll be like, yo, try this here, breathe here, do this with your voice. And all of a sudden they're orating like Dr. King or something. You're like, what the fuck? It's amazing. So I joined his thing, and
interesting.
That was super helpful.
What was his name again?
Roger Love. He literally, anyone you can think of, like he's Tony Robbins' coach, Bo Easton's coach, but he also he's a vocal coach who works with Christina Aguilera, Eminem, Steven Tyler, like any singer or speaker you could think of, he works with.
So, okay, so that's really interesting because I've been how do I go into this without making it sound catastrophic? Because it's not. I talk a lot, just like you. Like I'm coaching people all day. I'm selling all day. I'm training all day. And when I'm selling and training, I speak a lot more passionately than when I don't. Right. Like if I'm just having casual conversation. So when I'm talking for 12 hours a day, like, dude, my chest is on fire by the end of it. So I started seeing an ENT and like figuring out what was going on with my vocal cords and this and that. And they basically told me that like they prescribed everything to try to fix it and it didn't. I guess there's like modules on my vocal cords and they don't work the way that they should. So I'm like overstressed. It's kind of like the way they explained it was when you have an injury, so you shift how you're moving to compensate for the pain, and then it moves differently forever.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was when I got my tonsils and adenoids and deviated septum all done at once or whatever, but long story short, they basically said, like, you might just need to learn how to talk again and like probably go to like a vocal or like a speech therapist. So I'm like fascinated by that world right now.
Yeah, well, you'd be fascinated with what he does. Like he'll bring all these different people up, and he has 4 like different categories of what your voice is. And he's like, oh, it's the squeaky hinge, or it's the something door, or something this, and then he goes, here, try breathing this way. Most people breathe incorrectly. I always do, like it's my default. So just by changing your breathing, sometimes that fixes that.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy that like most humans absolutely suck at breathing, and it's like the number one thing that we need for life?
Yeah.
That's wild. I'm really curious about the improv and the stand-up. So I hear about the improv stuff a lot. in the sense that like that's wildly powerful for a number of reasons. And I'm really curious to hear your experience. I'm also really curious about how you said that that was way better than stand up, which doesn't surprise me because to me, stand up seems more like a fear bursting activity, whereas improv seems to be a lot more like mental agility, I guess, for lack of a better term. But talk to me about your experience between those two and what you think you got most out of each one.
So I went to stand up first, and what I learned later from my friends who were in that world is that stand up's better if you do improv for at least like 3 semesters and then go do stand up.
Huh.
They could probably explain better why that is, but now I actually see it too. But it would be difficult for me to explain it to you.
Yeah.
Um, but so when I went in to do stand up, it wasn't like in improv classes, you're up all the time. You're up, you're doing stuff, you're
Yeah.
active. But stand up was a lot of like talking, and then you would sit there, and then one by one, a person would get up and do shit. And stand up, it's a lot harder to be funny. Like you got to work for years to be really funny, right? Like there's comedians that we know their household names that bombed for years. But with improv, when there's like you just know, oh, you're up there, like anything you say, like if you and I are just hanging out and there's 3 people, like we might be cracking up at some stuff, but if someone said it on stage, it's not funny, right? Like it's like this
Yeah.
weird
It's the
thing, like,
environment
oh, I know,
situation.
yeah, like I know this is challenging. And oh, you just came up with that off the top of your head. Pretty fucking funny. Not Chris Rock funny, but funny for you to do that and be inexperienced at it,
Yeah.
right? So it's like there's more of a high, so and then you're up all the time. You're doing stuff. And I just feel like you're learning so much. Where with stand up, it was more homework. Like it was like, hey, here's the thing. You get up maybe once or twice in a 90-minute class, and you got to write your next routine for next week. Where at that point, I was super busy. I'm writing all the time anyway. I'm
Yeah.
prepping this. I'm doing that. I was like, oh my God, I don't want more homework writing. So like with improv, you're learning and getting better and seeing right on the spot, which I like. I learn better that way anyway. Like, if I were to take up golf or build a roof, I would go play golf or get on the roof with the guy who knows how to build a roof and read a book about it. You know what I mean? Stand up was more like that. Like he'd be like, "Oh, read these books." I was like, "That sucks." But with improv, and what I love so much was improv teaches you many things. Your fear of public speaking. Stand up obviously does that too, but
Yeah.
you're up there in front of people. Teaches you to think really quickly on your feet. It teaches you yes and. So the first rule of improv is yes and, which is really a critical rule for building relationships and navigating business and whatever. For example, like if you and I are on the same team business wise, I don't know, we're coworkers, or you're the boss, I'm the employee, whatever, and I go, hey Mike, let's repaint the outside of the building. You go, great idea, and I go, cool, I'm thinking pink, and you're like, fuck, I was thinking blue. But if you say, dude, that's the worst idea, then we have a weird dynamic, right? Like you shut me down. You told me no. So you never say no in improv. So you go, Jay, that's a great idea. Yeah, it's a breast cancer awareness month, or yeah, I know you're a fan of Bret Hart or whatever. Like, you just come up with something, even though you're like, all right, I'm going to Jedi mind trick him out of doing pink in a week.
Yeah.
But like, you don't just say no immediately, right?
Yeah.
So you're like, yeah, why would that be? All right, let me think about, whatever. So the yes and thing super important. So you and I are on stage. Whatever you say, I got a yes and you. If you go, oh, it's a beautiful day out, and I'm like, no, it's raining. Well, the scene's dead. Or if you go, hey, like you're gonna stick me up, right? And I go, oh, that's just a finger. Or I pretend you're holding a cup of coffee when you clearly communicated to me that it's a gun. It kills the scene. So you always go yes and yes and yes and. And then as you get better, you heighten it. I don't know comedically how to explain that. I've asked my friends who are like comedians and stuff. I don't know how to explain that to people if they don't know. But you heighten, you keep taking it up a notch.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's the way that I see that as being so valuable, in case anybody's listening to this and is not sold on it yet, I'm a big believer that like we're all in the people business. And the majority of that comes down to communication, even outside of people will hear like people business and think I'm only talking about business, which I'm not. Like I genuinely, I just finished reading Crucial Conversations again the other day. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, man, if people actually knew how to fucking communicate with one another, the world would be so different.
Yeah.
But that's like the advanced classes, right? Because
Totally.
it's artful communication that can be like that's critical in sales. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's where my head immediately goes because that's the world I live in. But like anywhere else, like the example you just gave, how many times do people run into shit like that every single day where they're like, man, I really don't want that. But if I
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
then like it's World War III. So
Yeah, totally. And it's just fun. Like it's a great team building thing. Any
yeah,
kind of teams, businesses, whatever. I like I said, I do it when I get brought in, and like you learn all these little games. Because as a beginner, you're not going to walk in and get up on stage and you're as good as Tina Fey and John Candy or something. Like you're just doing these really beginner amateur games. And
yeah,
then I've learned all those games, so I pull those out all the time. Like if we're out to dinner with just six friends, I might do it or whatever. Like Bedros would always, because Bedros always like puts it out there. I'm not saying anything he wouldn't say. He's like more socially awkward and he gets drained from social situations. So he's like, yo, dude, where the fuck are you? Like, come entertain these people. Like, do those games and do this shit, you know? So
yeah,
so it's just a lot, and because everyone's out of their comfort zone together, it's like that collective thing where you're laughing together and laughter like in the I know they say this in the culture code, like laughter is the universal sign of safety. So everyone's like, we're laughing together. Now we feel more bonded, connected. You're being stupid. I'm being stupid. Everyone's kind
yeah.
of awkward here. It's just a fun kind of way to bring down the walls and, get everyone kind of on the same page.
That's so cool. Yeah, you got me thinking because I've been toying with like throwing micro events. Um, I gotta be careful what I say in this because I don't know when it's gonna go live and I haven't publicized some of this stuff yet, but
Yeah.
we're building like a sales competition for our clients and as we move into the B2B world and the result, like the reward is gonna be this epic, like in-person mastermind, like
That's sick.
UFC fight experience.
Wow.
Like it's gonna
Nice.
be really sick.
Yeah.
But yeah, this whole like micro event, like I love that space. And yet here I am not running it. It's like go figure, dude. Like, come on. So I
Oh,
might
you got to do it, dude. You got to do it. So
I
much
might
fun.
finally have to.
So awesome.
Um, talk to me about what you're doing now. So you moved out to Miami after a decade in California. What are you still building now? Because at this point, we've really glossed over the fact that like you were like a heavy contributor to one of the biggest fitness magazines. You like wrote books with massive publishers, like all that stuff happened. Well, what are you doing now?
Yeah, so we're in Miami. Like I said, still, podcast is still a major focus. Like I said, I think we're on 494, 495, so
Dang.
right around the corner from 500. I still, there was a period of time in 2020 where we weren't doing events for a little bit. We're back to doing events. I had gotten up to doing 10 of my own events a year, which was a lot.
Mhm.
Four was great. Maybe six was a sweet spot. I think, looking back, like if I could probably do one a month, honestly, if I just tighten things up a little. Like I love doing them. I would do them every other weekend. It does drain you.
Yeah,
Because I go hard, like I go hard. Like
of
after that, I'm
course.
just wiped out. But I love doing them. So we're back to doing at least four a year. Um, and then yeah, so we have our kind of like a hard ticket coaching program. And then right now I'm kind of just working on building out some lower tier options that I haven't had for a few years. Like I told you, we used to have the monthly $20 a month deal. So we're kind of playing with some different options for that. And then I haven't been doing quite as much speaking in the last couple of years. So I just
Mhm.
want to, get back into that and stuff like that. But nothing crazy,
Yeah,
just the same thing. Trying to stay focused on, a few things.
that's awesome, dude. Almost 500 episodes on the podcast is impressive. We're at like, I don't know, this one will probably be like 260.
That's still a lot. That's still way more than most people ever get to.
Yeah, most people
Yeah.
don't pass like what's the number, like 13 or some
Yeah.
shit.
Yeah.
Um,
What was fun was in LA, we built a little studio right in the house. So I'd say for 5 years straight, I didn't do one virtual. Everyone was right there. So
yeah.
everybody came in person and it was like, and I would be intentional about building. Like when I got to LA, I knew three people. When I left, like if I pulled up the LA numbers on my phone, I would scroll for 10 minutes. I literally have like 300 friends in LA now.
Yeah.
But that was all intentional. Like I did that. I structured my whole life around that. Where was I going with that? Oh, so anytime someone would come over for the podcast, I would schedule at a time where everything was done for the day. That way I had as much time as I wanted to hang out after. And so many times I'd end up going out. for coffee after or going out to eat. I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, for you don't know wrestlers, but Sheamus is a pro wrestler. He's from Ireland. He's a
Yep.
multi-time world champion. Obviously, So
Yeah.
Sheamus came
Weird
over.
story about why I know him, but I do know him.
Oh, you have to tell me that. So Sheamus came over at 1 p.m. for the podcast. 1 a.m. We're still hanging out across the street in the Irish bar. And
That's
I
awesome.
barely even drink, and I never drink beer, but I'm with Sheamus, So he's like ordering us Guinness, and we're whacking down beer and everything. And so I built so many really close, lifelong friendships with great
Yeah.
people just from doing that. Like a lot of the WWE guys, that's how we're friends. Tony Blauer, that's how we're friends. A lot of people like
So
that.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, dude, podcasting is it's such a cheat code to like
yeah,
relationship capital.
yeah,
Like if I were to start this over, I probably would have niched. Like I have friends that 40% of their high ticket coaching clients come from their podcast and they do
yeah,
like solid numbers, right, in the health and wellness space. And I'm like, dude, I've booked one call for my podcast in the history of the show, and he no showed me.
wow,
Like that's not what this is for. Um, I've always looked at it as like, yeah, there's the authority hacking piece because like my work has nothing to do with door to door solar, but we authority hack into a niche that needs our help. And then all of a sudden I can get on stages in the industries. Like there's that component. So we monetize, I guess, indirectly. But for me, it was always about relationship capital.
yeah,
It was about moving conversations from DM to iMessage, right? And like building real relationships with people where all of a sudden, fast forward, you're on the golf course instead of on Zoom,
yeah,
which is kind of cool. Um, I started in person because I would always like when I was out in California, I would just max out as many interviews as I could while I was out there. Actually, dude, I was in when I interviewed Bedros, he had me in his studio. And literally, as I was getting to his studio up in Chino, I get a text from my, at the time, girlfriend, now wife, that like, that was the first time part of LAX shut down in like early March. Cause I
uh,
guess like one TSA official got COVID or something. So like part of the airport shut down and she's texting me and like freaking out, like what's going to happen. And I'm
uh,
like, I don't know, but I'm about to interview a dude that's like the man. So
yeah,
like, I'll deal with this after
yeah,
type of thing.
yeah.
Um, but up until that point, it was fantastic. On that trip, I interviewed Bedros, Steve Weatherford,
Oh, cool.
um,
Yeah, I know
previous
Steve.
trips, a bunch of others. But then it was like all Zoom for a long time. Now we're finally like, we're moving and grooving again. I'm trying to do as many in person as humanly possible.
Yeah,
Uh, because we're finally doing the YouTube and it's a whole ordeal now that we finally have the bandwidth, right? But like,
yeah,
I had to do what I could here while I was building the business because the business pays for all the shit.
yeah,
So
yeah,
uh, but it's a really cool vehicle.
yeah.
Before we get out of here, Jay, I've really enjoyed this conversation, man. Where can people find you? Plug away. Website, social media. Where do you hang out most on the internet? Podcast, all that stuff.
Yeah, so j.fit will take you to my main site, and then at J Ferruggia on Instagram, and then Renegade Strike Show on iTunes, Spotify, all the places.
Boom. All right, y'all. That all of that will be linked down in the show notes. Get connected, show some love. You know the deal. Jay, last question I have for you. Going all the way back. Starting to train clients, realizing like, dang, I can make a bunch of money at this, moving home, stacking all of your cash, opening that gym, creating that environment, right? Really starting on the East Coast there and building that up to what it became, the crazy, crazy athletes you had coming out of there, revolutionizing that like industry in that way, right? The group training model, then moving across the country to rebuild, right? And doing everything that you did in Santa Monica, starting the events, moving into the high ticket space, ending up in Miami, podcast still crushing it almost a decade later, 500 episodes later, killing it in business. Dude, this entire window, what's been the biggest lesson that you've learned that has yielded the most results and had the biggest impact on your life and in your business?
I would, you could give probably three different answers here. Um, One would be just executing and taking action and not overthinking. Like I'm an OCD Virgo, So I can definitely default to overthinking and overanalyzing, which is why it's really important for me to be around people like Bedros and people like that who are just like, yo, it doesn't fucking matter, just execute it.
Yeah.
And like I started to notice that the first year or two, B and I hung out, where I would ask him, like, let's say we're just out, we're going to the comedy store one night, I'd be like, hey, should I do this thing? I'm gonna do I got option A, B, or C. I'm gonna do option A. And then he'd go, yeah, it's gonna fucking crush. And then 2 weeks later, I'd be like, yo, here's the thing. I was thinking this through, and